Thanks again to all the sponsors. Thanks to all of you for coming out. I could talk to you forever, and we're going to take some audience questions here. There's a few other things I want to get to first, though. One of them is, in talking about the 80s and being a kid from Indiana, and I know that your experience with this probably was different in the UK. When you got to America, I don't know how many of you in the audience remember the PMRC. Yeah. But I had an experience as a kid where, my dad and stepmom it basically left me to my own devices as far as music that I was discovering and things like that. And I'm, 7th, 8th grade, full-on thrash metal kid with the skateboard and metal records and posters on the walls and everywhere. And this thing had happened where my stepmom was Christmas shopping, and she was at the cassette store in the local mall, and she asked whoever this guy was working behind the counter, I'm here shopping for my stepson for Christmas. And the guy says, "Oh, what kind of music does he like?" And she said, he wears T-shirts that say, Slayer and Metallica and Judas Priest. And this guy just freaks out. This is in the south side of Indianapolis in 1988 or something. And, the guy's like, "Oh, your son's worshiping the devil. He's on drugs. He's probably suicidal." And I came home from school that day, and my dad and stepmom, who were never in my bedroom, were both literally in my bedroom, flipping through my records, pulling out lyric sheets, studying the posters on the wall, looking at everything. And I thought, partly because of what the metal community had prepared me for with the PMRC and all, I was like, well, this is where they cut my hair and send me off to some reprogramming, because it was like that then. I would love to know, as Rob Halford of Judas Priest, who lived through that, and even went in a courtroom over it. What was that like, and how did that feel? And thank God we seem to have gotten out of that dark time in our culture.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I always think about were the two beautiful guys that lost their lives, I don't think of anything about that. I just think about this tragic loss of two beautiful guys who were hardcore Priest fans. They loved Judas Priest, Their story got terribly twisted and manipulated. But this was a simple case, which we've seen so many times, where a couple of young guys, they come from a family that is not the perfect family. I'm not going to go into that, but you make a few choices, then you take those choices to an extreme, and these terrible things happen. So that's the heart of it, not only for me, but I think for the rest of us, that it's so sad to think about the loss of those two beautiful guys. Having said that, stepping off the tour bus and being told before we step off in Dallas, I think it was, that the sheriff was going to present you with the subpoena to appear in court. We didn't know what was going on at this point. Our tour manager said, just he's going to go, "You've been served," and you just take it from him, don't say anything. So we took, and that's how it was left. We didn't really talk much about it because we didn't know what was going on. And then, of course, we actually had to leave our home country and come to Reno, Nevada, to literally fight for our lives. It was that extreme. It was only when we met with our attorneys that they were explaining all of the different, ways that this was being pursued, that we thought, this is really very, very serious, not only for the loss of those two great guys, but just the perimeter of it, about subliminal messages and First Amendment rights and all of these attacking points that really had nothing to do with anything other than these people hating the music that we made. They didn't like what we did. They thought we genuinely were a threat, A bit like what Elvis went through and what Little Richard went through. And we couldn't understand that because we're guys from the UK, and we've never had, we were talking about this, Ryan, we've never had that experience in the UK. British people don't talk about music that way. They don't accuse music of doing things like that. It just doesn't make sense to the British public, And please don't get me wrong, I'm not having a go at the way that certain parts of this country were involved in that, because I think a lot of it, again, a bit like what's going on now, a certain portion of society is being whipped up into this hysterical frenzy about this music being so terrible and destructive and satanistic and it's no good for you, and it was all very negative, now fear. And a lot of people were going, yeah, you're absolutely right, you know, because of the tragedy that was attached to it. We got to the heart of the matter pretty quickly, and once we did some interviews with CNN and we were able to tell our side of the story, and because I think that there was this preconception that these guys are, yeah, man, fuck you, you know, because we were able to really articulate our point of view and, you know, have a grain of intelligence to really exchange these discussions and explain our point of view and what do you feel about that? Tell us how you feel, you know, and they would say this, and then we'd say, well, no, this is what really is meant here. Everybody was going, oh, we got this completely wrong, you know, these are just a bunch of guys in the band having a good time, you know, and so are their fans. So then it became all of this business about this subliminal messaging, which if the judge had found for the prosecution, the aftermath of that could have been quite bleak. One of our defence people suggested that because of the so-called subliminal aspect of what this whole case was hinging on, this do it thing, which was never there in the first place, it was just the way I was singing, and a strange, weird effect, was that, you know, before any piece of music was going to be played on the radio, the station had to make a statement saying, we disassociate ourselves from any possible subliminal music in this song. And then they put on a track by Priest. You know, and that wouldn't only be for Priest, that would be everybody. And I'm not being hysterical here, this is what we were told. That this would, if the judge had found for the prosecution, then it would have gone through all these different levels of the court system. And it was just a mishmash, because it wasn't really First Amendment rights. It was a very unusual type of thing. It goes back to in the movies in the 50s, they'd flash some popcorn they actually used to do that, but you could see it. You go, oh, I just saw some popcorn, I need some popcorn. Well, you can't do that. You know, you can't do that with music. You know, how can something be subliminal if you can hear it? So it was a very, very difficult and very, very interesting case from a legal point of view, from a technical or audio point of view. But, you know, that wrapped up with what Tipper Gore was doing and the PMRC and
they were putting records by Prince and Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, he wasn't,
you know, it wasn't just Wasp and Priest. It was
Sheena East and everybody. I mean, I'm all for explaining preempting the content of something. I think that's common sense, you know, especially if. But you know, what are kids now? I don't know what a kid is. You know, I mean, how is an 8-year-old thinking now? How is a 10-year-old thinking now? You know, I think the thinking was in those days. You know, if there are words on there that I don't want my family, my kids or whatever to be exposed to, I want to be able to see that there's some content like that, and I can say I don't want this for my children, because that really was the heart of the matter. And that's no different to going to the movies. It's an R-rated movie, a PG-rated, a G-rated. We have that in the UK, worldwide. So it's a very big kind of sociological, almost anthropological discussion from an artistic censorship point of view. But emotionally, it was very difficult. But, you know, we got through it. And again, with not only from the incredible defence team that we had, but the fans were just unbelievable. The fans were with us every day at that courthouse in Reno, you know, holding up posters and cheering us on and that kind of thing. We really had tremendous support from our fans, and we'll never forget that. And I always remember at the end of the trial, the fans gave me this beautiful, huge Stars and Stripes flag with messages written on it, which I've still got. I've got it at my house in Phoenix, and I occasionally I look at that because it's just a great memory that has survived that experience, and it really shows you the true strength and power and love and community of the metal community that we have, that we're always looking after each other, we always have each other's back, we always support each other no matter what we go through.
Getting a bit choked up listening to that. Yes. Sorry, to collect myself from that. Yeah, and I was always, as a kid even, and through adulthood, I've always believed, and I've always said, anyone who thinks that this type of music, heavy metal or punk or hardcore or anything like that, that it's driving anyone to suicide or violence or, I've always said that music was a huge part of keeping me from those things. It's
yes,
thanks to heavy metal.
It is. I mean, especially some of the darker themes of heavy metal. And again, some of it I'm not personally attracted to, but I'd be the last person to say, stop playing that, making that kind of music. That's ridiculous. You have to allow everybody the right to express themselves, no matter how it is. That's the way humanity should be. That's how the world became civilized. And it's important to have discourse. It's important to bump up against each other, because that's how you grow. That's how you better yourself. You become a more open-minded. The wisdom starts to come in. You have to be able to look at something or listen to something, and if it's not quite working for you, either put it to one side. Or find out what it is, why is that making me feel the way I feel, And really, you shouldn't do that about music. You either like it or you don't. If you don't like it, switch it off and just shut your mouth up. That's just simple, a simple philosophy.
Heavy metal, taught me about H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe and The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Nostradamus.
Yeah.
And I became way more interested and fascinated in so much literature and art, William Blake, through metal than I ever did through the school system in Indiana in the 1980s and 90s. So, guys, we have 2 mics here. We can start lining up for questions. I want to talk about Painkiller. I want to talk about Fight. I want to talk about 2. I wish we had several more hours, but we don't.
I will come back. This has been great, and I'll definitely come back.
Yes.
And we can talk some more.
So what we'll do here, because we don't have all the time in the world, and we have a lot of awesome fans here, if you could keep it to one question. The question cannot be, can I have a hug or can I take a picture? Only because that takes all night.
Yeah, and watch me, because as you know, I just go on and on and on and on. So I'm going to try and be as quick as I can.
Yeah, we'll start over here, and if you could just tell us your name and your question for Rob, and obviously, try to keep it to Rob and his career, of course.
Hey, Rob. Heavy Metal Greg here. I have a YouTube channel. Electric Eye came out, and that was some very forward lyrics. Actually, if you still read through the lyric sheet of Electric Eye, you realize that there's a camera on every corner.
Yes.
And,
even before the internet and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, the inspiration of that obviously has much more impact probably now than when it was originally written. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. I'm just always looking for ideas. That was the great transition out of certain kinds of music. I've always loved that side of metal that can have its serious tone and can look at why you breaking the law. There's a reason. And Electric Eye, what does that mean? Well, we know exactly what it means now, but at that particular time, maybe some people were still trying to figure it out. But that was before we're at now, and literally every aspect of our life is being recorded and looked into, and whether that's a good thing or whether that's a bad thing is a whole other debate. But that's, for me as a lyricist, I'm just trying to find a different idea, a different angle.
I see a camera right there.